The Messerschmitt streaked past at 540 miles per hour, a silver blur against the gray German sky. Lieutenant Urban Drew watched it disappear in seconds, his P-51 Mustang feeling suddenly ancient, obsolete, like he was flying a biplane against the future itself. The jet's twin engines screamed a sound no propeller-driven fighter could ever make. It had just torn through his bomber formation, 30mm cannons shredding a B-17's wing clean off. And Drew couldn't do a damn thing about it. He pushed his throttle to the firewall, 440 miles per hour, his absolute maximum. The jet was already 3 miles ahead and climbing. Then Drew did something that seemed insane. Instead of chasing, he turned away, because American pilots had discovered something that would change everything about this impossible fight. They'd found the one moment when the world's most advanced fighter became killable. It's March 1944, and Allied bomber crews are encountering something that shouldn't exist yet. The Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwalbe, which translates to Swallow, is the world's first operational jet fighter, and it's rewriting every rule of aerial combat that took 4 years of war to establish. The numbers alone tell a terrifying story. While the best Allied fighters, the P-51 Mustang and the Supermarine Spitfire, max out around 440 miles per hour, the Me-262 cruises at 540. That 100-mile-per-hour difference isn't just a statistic. It's the difference between being able to engage an enemy and watching them vanish before you can even line up a shot. But speed is just the beginning. The Me-262's rate of climb is phenomenal, allowing it to reach bomber altitude faster than any propeller fighter attempting to intercept it. Its turn radius at high speed is tighter. Its acceleration is instant. No need to manage propeller pitch or worry about engine torque. And its armament is devastating. 430mm Mk, 108 cannons that fire high-explosive rounds designed specifically to destroy heavy bombers. A single 3-second burst from a Me-262 can completely disintegrate a B-17 Flying Fortress. Pilots report seeing bombers simply cease to exist, transformed from aircraft into expanding clouds of debris in the time it takes to blink. The psychological impact on Allied bomber crews is profound. These men have already endured months of flying through flak barrages that turn the sky into a steel storm, already watched friends die in burning wreckage, already pushed through fear that would paralyze most people. But the Me-262 introduces a new kind of terror. With conventional German fighters, you at least see them coming. You track them through their attack run. Your gunners have time to aim, time to fire, time to hope. The jet gives you none of that. It appears as a distant speck, and 1 second later it's already past, already gone, and someone in your formation is falling. There's no warning, no time to react. Just sudden, overwhelming violence delivered by something that feels less like an aircraft and more like a force of nature. Allied fighter pilots, the men tasked with protecting these bombers, face their own nightmare. Every tactical manual they've studied, every maneuver they've practiced, every instinct they've developed becomes useless against this machine. You can't catch an Me-262 inches, a stern chase. Even with a massive altitude advantage, even with perfect positioning, the moment that jet pilot sees you and opens his throttles, the engagement is over. He's gone. You're left holding a closing speed that's suddenly negative, watching your target shrink to nothing while your airspeed indicator maxes out and your engine screams in protest. You can't outturn them either. The conventional wisdom says jet fighters sacrifice maneuverability for speed, that in a turning fight, a nimble propeller fighter should dominate. But the Me-262 doesn't follow conventional wisdom. Its swept wings and pure power-to-weight ratio allow it to maintain energy through turns that would bleed a Mustang or Thunderbolt dry. And even if you somehow force one into a sustained dogfight, Even if you somehow get on its tail for that perfect gun solution, you're dealing with an aircraft that can simply decide the fight is over and accelerate away at any moment. There's no forcing the engagement. The jet pilot controls when the fight starts and when it ends. You're just trying to survive in between. Intelligence reports flowing into Allied headquarters make clear this isn't just a new weapon. It's a paradigm shift. If Germany manages to produce Me-262 in large numbers, if they can get enough of them operational before the war ends, the entire strategic bombing campaign, the campaign that's crushing German industry and paving the way for invasion, could be stopped. Thousands of bombers grounded, thousands of trained aircrews useless, years of tactical development worthless. The assessment is stark. This threat must be contained, and contained fast. Fortunately, the numbers are low. Hitler himself contributes to this limitation through a disastrous decision that borders on the surreal. When he first sees the Me-262 inches 1943, instead of recognizing it as the revolutionary fighter it is, he becomes obsessed with turning it into a fast bomber. He believes Germany needs a high-speed bomber to strike back at Allied advances, to retaliate against bombing raids, to deliver that one psychological blow that will turn the war. His engineers try to explain that the aircraft is designed as a fighter, that converting it sacrifices its primary advantages, that they're wasting the most advanced fighter in the world on a mediocre bombing platform. Hitler doesn't care. He orders the conversion. Months of production time are lost. Jet fighters that should be operational sit in hangars being refitted. By the time sanity prevails and the Me-262 returns to its fighter role, crucial months have passed. Production difficulties compound the delay. Jet engines are extraordinarily complex compared to conventional piston engines. They require exotic materials, precision manufacturing, and specialized knowledge that Germany is rapidly losing as Allied bombing destroys factories and kills experienced engineers. Each Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet has an operational lifespan of about 25 hours before requiring a complete overhaul. 25 hours. A typical mission consumes an hour of that lifespan. The logistics are nightmarish, and pilot training is another bottleneck. Flying a jet requires completely different skills than flying a propeller fighter. The throttle response is delayed. The fuel consumption is massive. The landing speed is dangerously high. Experienced pilots need weeks to adapt. New pilots need months they don't have. So the Me-262 threat, while real, remains limited. But limited doesn't mean eliminated. Every jet that gets airborne is a potential massacre. And Allied command issues a clear directive. Find a way to kill these things. Study them. Understand them. Develop tactics. Because technological superiority isn't permanent. Germany will solve its production problems eventually. And when they do, the Allies need an answer ready. The tactical analysis begins with observation. Allied pilots start documenting every Me-262 encounter in meticulous detail. Time of day, location, altitude, attack angle, weather conditions, how the jet approached, how it disengaged, what its pilot seemed to be doing. These after-action reports flow to intelligence officers who begin building a profile of the Me-262's operational behavior. And patterns emerge, patterns that reveal something crucial. For all its technological supremacy, the jet is predictable. Not because its pilots are incompetent, they're often the Luftwaffe's best, but because the aircraft itself imposes limitations. First discovery: Me-262 must operate from specific airfields. Jets need long, smooth runways. Their landing speed is nearly 120 miles per hour, much faster than conventional fighters. A grass field that works fine for a Bf-109 will kill an Me-262. This means jet operations are concentrated at a limited number of known bases, and bases are stationary. Bases can be watched. Second discovery. Takeoff and landing are vulnerable moments. During takeoff, an Me-262 pilot must manage a delicate acceleration phase. The Jumo 004 turbojets are temperamental. Advance the throttle too quickly, and the engine flames out. Too slowly, and you're sitting on the runway burning fuel. There's a careful, specific procedure. And during those 30 seconds of acceleration, the jet is no faster than a conventional fighter. It's actually slower because it's laden with fuel and ammunition, because it's still building speed, because it hasn't reached the altitude where its advantages manifest. Landing is even worse. The jet must slow down, must establish a stable approach, must commit to a specific flight path that can't be radically altered without stalling. For perhaps 60 seconds, the Me-262 is exactly what it's not supposed to be: a slow, predictable target. Third discovery. Fuel consumption is massive. The Jumo 004 engines are thirsty. A typical combat mission gives the Me-262 maybe 60 to 90 minutes of flight time, and that's with careful fuel management. Aggressive maneuvering, full throttle sprints, combat at high power settings, all of this drains fuel at an alarming rate, which means frequent landings, which means frequent vulnerability windows. The more aggressive the jet pilot, the sooner he must return to base. The sooner he must become killable. Fourth discovery. Engine reliability is problematic. Those 25-hour lifespans mean engines are constantly being swapped, but more immediately, they mean engines fail. Allied pilots report seeing Me-262 seconds simply lose power mid-flight. One engine cutting out, sometimes both. When an engine fails, the jet's performance collapses. A single-engine Me-262 can barely maintain altitude. A no-engine Me-262 is a glider, and not a particularly good one. Engine failures during takeoff are catastrophic. Engine failures during landing are fatal. And engine failures happen frequently enough that Allied intelligence considers them a legitimate tactical factor. Fifth discovery. Pilot training is insufficient. The Luftwaffe is running out of time, out of fuel, out of instructors. New Me-262 pilots are getting minimal jet transition training before being thrown into combat. They make mistakes. They misjudge their speed. They enter maneuvers their aircraft can handle, but they can't. They waste fuel on unnecessary acrobatics. They panic when engaged and make predictable decisions. The aircraft is advanced. Many of its pilots are not. From these discoveries, a tactic emerges. It's not elegant. It's not fair. But war isn't about elegance or fairness. It's about finding the enemy's weakness and exploiting it until they break. The tactic is simple. Don't fight the jet in the air. Fight it on the ground. Or, more precisely, fight it during those vulnerable moments when it's transitioning between ground and air. Airfield patrol operations, officially called rat racing by the pilots who fly them. The concept is straightforward. Identify known Me-262 bases. Position fighters nearby, hidden by terrain or altitude. Wait. When you see a jet taking off or coming into land, hit it during its vulnerable phase. Attack during the acceleration run when it can't dodge. Attack during the landing approach when it can't deviate. Attack when the technological advantage is neutralized by operational necessity. But simple doesn't mean easy. These jet bases are among the most heavily defended positions in Germany. Flak batteries surround them, and German anti-aircraft fire has already killed thousands of Allied pilots. Approaching an enemy airfield at low altitude, slow enough to line up a deflection shot on a taking-off jet, means flying through a curtain of exploding steel. Conventional German fighters patrol these bases constantly. And while they can't catch a jet, they can absolutely catch a P-51 that's focused on something else. The Me-262 itself Even during takeoff, even at reduced speed, still has those 430mm cannons, and its pilot knows you're coming. He's looking for you. One burst that connects, and you're gone. The pilots who volunteer for these missions are either incredibly brave or slightly insane, maybe both. Major George Preddy, one of the most successful American aces, with 26 confirmed kills, is among the first to execute this tactic successfully. On August 1944, he positions his P-51 Mustang near Zerbst Airfield, known for Me-262 operations. He watches, waits, patient. Then he sees it, and Me-262 beginning its takeoff roll, engines spooling up, accelerating down the runway. Preddy dives, full throttle. The flak opens up immediately, black puffs of explosive death filling the sky around him. He ignores them. His entire focus is on timing, on geometry, on that narrow window where he'll be in range, and the jet will still be vulnerable. The Me-262 pilot sees him coming and tries to accelerate faster, but the engines won't respond faster than their design allows. Physics doesn't care about desperation. Preddy opens fire at 400 yards, walking his tracers toward the accelerating target. The jet is doing maybe 200 miles per hour now, fast for a takeoff, but not yet fast enough, not yet safe. Preddy's 50 caliber rounds tear into the Me-262's left engine. Black smoke erupts. The jet lurches, loses thrust, starts to veer. The pilot tries to compensate, but at takeoff speed there's no energy to work with, no options, no way out. The Me-262 slams into the ground off the runway, cartwheels, explodes. Preddy pulls up hard, flak bursts, tracking his escape, and clears the airfield by what his wingman later describes as maybe 50 feet, maybe less. One jet down. One tactic confirmed. Word spreads through Allied fighter groups. Other pilots try it. Some succeed. Some die trying. The math is brutal but effective. For every 3 attempts, maybe one results in a confirmed kill. Maybe one results in an Allied fighter shot down. Maybe one results in nothing but wasted fuel and frayed nerves. But the confirmed kills add up, and each dead Me-262 is one less jet threatening the bomber streams. Chuck Yeager, who will later become the first pilot to break the sound barrier, gets his Me-262 kill on the 6th of November 1944. He's leading a flight near Munich when he spots a Me-262 approaching its base for landing. The jet is low, slow, committed to its approach path. Yeager dives out of the sun, using the angle to build speed and mask his approach. The Me-262 pilot is focused on landing, on managing his speed, on watching his fuel gauge tick toward empty. He doesn't see Yeager until it's too late. Yeager opens fire at 300 yards. His rounds stitch across the Me-262's fuselage and right wing. Pieces fly off. The jet pilot tries to abort, tries to go around, advances his throttles for a rejected landing. But one engine doesn't respond. The other flames out from combat damage. The Me-262 drops like a stone, impacts the ground short of the runway, skids, and disintegrates. Yeager doesn't stick around to watch. He's already climbing, already leaving, because a dozen German fighters just saw what happened, and they're coming for him. Other success stories follow similar patterns. Lieutenant Colonel Elwin Rigetti bags an Me-262 during takeoff. Captain William Wisner catches one during landing. Major Walter Beckham shoots down a jet pilot who made the mistake of trying to dogfight, who forgot that his one advantage is speed, and threw it away for a turning engagement he couldn't win. The statistics start to pile up. Through late 1944 and early 1945, Allied fighters claim dozens of Me-262 kills. The exact number is disputed. The war records are incomplete, and both sides inflate their claims. But the trend is undeniable. The unkillable jets are dying. Germany responds with predictable desperation. Airfield defenses are massively increased. More flak batteries, more searchlights, more barrage balloons. Some jet bases become so heavily defended that approaching them is suicidal regardless of tactical advantage. Escort fighters are assigned specifically to protect Me-262 seconds during their vulnerable moments, Fu-190 seconds, and Bf-109 seconds, flying standing patrols around jet bases with orders to engage any Allied fighter that approaches. It works sometimes. Allied pilots report being jumped by conventional fighters while lining up on a taking-off jet, forced to break off, forced to dogfight, while their primary target escapes. Landing and takeoff procedures are accelerated. Pilots are trained to use maximum throttle advancement that doesn't flame the engines, to accept higher risk of mechanical failure in exchange for shorter vulnerability windows. Some bases implement diversionary tactics, having conventional fighters take off simultaneously with jets to confuse Allied pilots about which target to engage. Dummy aircraft are positioned on runways to draw fire. Smoke generators obscure visibility during jet operations. But none of these countermeasures solve the fundamental problem. Jets still need runways. They still need fuel. They still need to land. And Allied numbers are overwhelming. For every Me-262 that gets airborne, there are 50 Allied fighters in the area, maybe 100. The Luftwaffe is fighting an asymmetric war where they have technical superiority but catastrophic numerical inferiority. And in that equation, every vulnerability matters. Every loss hurts more because there are no reserves, no replacement aircraft waiting, no fresh pilots ready to step in. The tactical evolution continues throughout the war's final months. Allied pilots develop timing charts, documenting how long an Me-262 typically stays airborne based on mission type, calculating when jets will need to land, positioning themselves accordingly. They learn to recognize which German radio transmissions indicate incoming jets, which cloud formations jets prefer for surprise attacks, which altitudes they typically operate at. The cat-and-mouse game becomes increasingly sophisticated on both sides. Some Me-262 pilots prove exceptionally skilled at surviving these conditions. Adolf Galland, Germany's legendary fighter ace, shoots down 7 Allied aircraft while flying the Me-262, all while evading repeated attempts on his life during landing approaches. He survives by being unpredictable, by varying his approach patterns, by never getting comfortable, by treating every landing like an enemy is waiting because an enemy usually is. But Galland is exceptional. Most jet pilots are just trying to stay alive long enough to learn the aircraft, and many don't make it that far. The strategic impact of these anti-jet tactics is significant but difficult to quantify precisely. The Me-262 program never reaches its potential, never becomes the bomber-destroyer force it could have been. But that failure stems from multiple factors: production problems, fuel shortages, pilot training limitations, Allied bombing of jet factories, Hitler's interference, and yes, the constant attrition from airfield attacks. Each of these factors contributes. Isolating any single cause is impossible, but Allied fighter pilots who flew these missions will tell you their operations mattered. They'll tell you about the jets they killed, the bombers they saved, the missions that succeeded because a Me-262 that should have been airborne was instead burning on a runway. By April 1945, Me-262 operations are sporadic and desperate. Fuel supplies have collapsed. Trained pilots are gone. Airfields are being overrun by advancing Allied ground forces. The jets that remain operational are flying from autobahns and farm roads, operating without proper support, without coordination, without hope. The technological miracle has been overwhelmed by logistics, by numbers, by the grinding reality that revolutionary weapons require functional infrastructure, and Germany's infrastructure is disintegrating. The bomber campaign continues. B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds still pound German cities and factories with relative impunity. The Me-262 threat has been contained, not through superior technology, but through superior tactics and overwhelming force. The jets that were supposed to change everything become a footnote to the larger story of Allied strategic bombing. Impressive machines, insufficient numbers, too late. There's a lesson here about warfare that transcends this specific historical moment. Technological superiority matters, but it's never enough by itself. The Me-262 was genuinely 20 years ahead of Allied aircraft in design and capability. In a fair fight, one-on-one, in open sky, it dominated completely. But wars aren't fair fights. They're complex systems where logistics, production, training, tactics, and numbers interact in ways that make simple technological comparisons meaningless. The Allies couldn't build a better fighter to beat the Me-262, so they didn't try. Instead, they studied the operational reality of jet combat, identified vulnerability windows, and exploited them relentlessly. They turned a technological disadvantage into a tactical opportunity. Innovation always meets counter-innovation. Every new weapon system generates countermeasures. Every revolutionary technology reveals unexpected limitations. The Me-262's speed made it unstoppable in flight, but created operational dependencies that could be exploited on the ground. Its advanced engines gave it phenomenal performance, but required infrastructure that was vulnerable to attack. Its complexity made it powerful but also fragile, and Allied pilots, facing a machine they couldn't match, adapted. They learned. They found the cracks in the armor and hammered them until the armor broke. The jet combat tactics developed during these desperate encounters influenced post-war aviation doctrine profoundly. The Korean War, just 5 years later, featured jet versus jet combat, where lessons from 1944 to 45 remained relevant. Vulnerable approach phases. Fuel management considerations. The importance of airfield security. These weren't new problems. They were the same problems with faster aircraft, and pilots who studied the Me-262's operational history understood how to exploit them. The legacy extends beyond tactics into strategic thinking about weapons development. Military planners learned that rushing revolutionary technology into combat before solving logistics and training creates expensive failures. They learned that complex systems require robust support infrastructure. They learned that quantity has a quality all its own, that 50 adequate fighters can overwhelm 5 superior ones through sheer presence and persistence. The Me-262 became a case study in how not to deploy a technological advantage. For the pilots who flew against these jets, who risked their lives attacking defended airfields for a shot at a vulnerable target, the experience remains profound decades later. They faced the future and found a way to defeat it with machines from the past. Not through bravery alone, though bravery was required. Not through skill alone, though skill mattered immensely, but through adaptation, through studying the enemy, through finding weakness in apparent invincibility, through accepting that sometimes the only way to beat a superior machine is to catch it at the one moment when superiority doesn't matter. The jets that were supposed to be unkillable died, not in glorious aerial combat, not in turning dogfights or high-speed chases. They died on runways. They died during landing approaches. They died in those brief seconds when physics and operational necessity made them vulnerable, when all the technological advancement in the world couldn't change the fact that aircraft need to take off and land, and during those moments, they're just targets like any other. The Me-262 was the future. But the future arrived at war, unprepared, unsupported, and facing an enemy that refused to fight fair. And in warfare, fair doesn't matter. Only winning matters. The propeller-driven fighters won, not because they were better aircraft, but because their pilots found a way.